Good evening. Roman Project PowerPoint by Henry George and William Charles.
The Romans were not called the Romans when they first originated. They were called Latins, and they settled along the marshy lands of the Tiber River and the 7 hills Rome was built on. Legend has it that Romulus and Remus were 2 brothers who were the sons of Mars and founded Rome, giving the Romans a respected origin. Their geographical surroundings made it easier for the Latins to move around and unify. Unlike Greek city-states, the Greeks were isolated into city-states because of the rigid mountains that split them. Rome, however, had the Apennine Mountains, which were lower and much smoother, allowed trade and unification to occur. Another group that's origins are unknown are the Etruscans, who controlled all of the lands north of Rome. Their ruling, however, soon grew to the center of the Italian peninsula, which included Rome and the Latins inhabiting it. The Romans learned many things from the Etruscans, like how to drain the marshy lands of the Tiber, the alphabet Etruscans learned from the Greeks, and the better architectural designs. The first of the Etruscan rulers were well-rounded, decisive, and respectful towards their government and people. One of them, Servius Tullius, even created the modern-day census. The later kings, however, were cruel towards their people, greedy of their power, and poor decision-makers. This led to the Latins to revolt and drive the Etruscans away from their settlement and form the Roman Republic.
After the monarchy was recreated into a republic, the government structure was recreated as well. There were certain levels of government who had different levels of authority. Some of these were quaestors, praetors, and censors. However, the highest level was the consul, 2 people who ruled over the republic like co-presidents, not as much kings. There was also the Senate, a council of 300 men who were directly involved with the government's actions, much like a supervisor in a way. One of these issues with this was that at the start of the republic, you had to be a patrician man, or of the higher class, to fill the role of government. This angered the lower class, who made up the bulk of the population. They were called plebeians. They were artisans, merchants, carpenters, etc., who wanted to be able to vote or fill the government structure. The patricians heard their issues and created a new government job, a tribune, who had to be plebeian. A tribune could veto laws they thought were harmful toward their people. In times of crisis, however, a dictator could be called upon to rule over all of Rome, but only for a maximum time of 6 months. One of the ideal ones was Cincinnatus, who we actually call Cincinnati from. He won a war, restored Roman order, and went home to his farmlands in 16 days. The reason the Romans kept a time span on a dictator's rule was because they were afraid of people who would be poor decision makers and destroy the civilization, like the kings of Etruscan almost had done. Then, one military leader rose to power and turned some heads with his ideas, and eventually became one of the most famous men in history. His name, Dr. J.
Dr. J!
I'm talking about Julius Caesar.
Caesar was a well-known military leader who helped the Republic expand their territory to new heights. He once built a bridge 3 football fields long in 10 days for his legion of 5,000 men to pass. This is virtually impossible around the world today, even with all the resources and technology we have. After his chain of victories, including the land named Gaul, he came back to Rome, a proud man, and forced the Senate to make him dictator king. After this was accomplished, he established reforms to public works like the bathhouse. He created tons of jobs for those who didn't have one. However, at a Senate meeting, one of his old friends, Brutus, thought like many others did, he had too much power. Brutus stabbed him 17 times. In Caesar's will, Octavian, whom he loved, to gain the throne. Octavian later named himself Augustus, or Exalted One. When he took power, many historians mark this day the Rome turns a republic to an empire.
Augustus was the first ruler of the New Age, the Roman Empire. He created a stable government from Rome, unlike one they have seen in a long time. Augustus created a civil service exam to fill government positions for all the talented Roman, regardless of their class. Augustus also helped make a more efficient way of stabilizing the economy. He ordered a census every so often to keep records of people who should be taxed and how much they should be taxed. He set up a postal service and created a system of coins to make trade easier. Like Caesar, he addressed the jobless and by putting them to work on public restoration for entertainment and religious purposes. The empire functioned efficiently for 200 years after Augustus, through the good rulers like Hadrian, who built a wall and codified the law, and Marcus Aurelius, who was then Plato's philosopher king, and through the bad rulers like Caligula, who even named his horse a consul, and Nero, who persecuted thousands of Christians. After this span of good and bad rulers, Rome fell into what became known as the Fall of Rome.
The fall of Rome was guided by several key aspects that were once why Rome was the superpower of its time. Lack of patriotism, foreign and disloyal military, greedy leadership, unstable government, and the loss of community values their ancestors once had led to the decline of Rome's authority and power in the ancient world. With the empire's bread and circus policy losing control, people who fought for Rome lost their patriotism that built the civilization. This led to a loss of community values that Rome once had, being descendants of Mars, the god of war. This caused the Romans to hire mercenaries from other lands for payment. These mercenaries were very disloyal and susceptible towards Rome. Protection from the help of mercenaries came at a high cost, so the government enforced a huge increase in taxation, widening the gap between the upper and lower class. Something else that widened the gap was the increased amount of slaves from other conquered lands, who put the working out of business. This put Rome in poverty, and because there was little money to go around, the Roman currency was weakened by a large deflation. With no one able to pay for food, shelter, clothes, or public entertainment anymore, Romans lost the culture they once had. While all of this was going on, while the military, economy, and social side of Rome was shattered, leaders didn't care about their people or the state of their land. They just cared about the amount of power they were able to have, which caused violence between rival families and commanding generals with their professional armies to gain the throne. During a 15-year span, there was a total of 26 rulers who ruled an average of less than 2 years. With 4 elements of Roman civilization up in smoke, the Romans' only chance of surviving surrounding invaders was for government on this and the Senate to get them out of the hole. However, the hole was too deep, and all of the rulers limited the government authority to next to nothing. With the walls of the Roman protection fading, one ruler, whose name was Diocletian, came to power and had an idea that would change Romans' luck. He would split the empire in two, the Eastern Roman Empire and the Western Roman Empire. One ruler would reign over one half, and another ruler would reign over the other. As this happened, multiple invading groups, including the Huns, led by Attila, invaded the Western Roman Empire and destroyed it. The Eastern Empire was left untouched and would continue to survive for the next 1,000 years as the Byzantine Empire.
The ancient Roman Empire and the United States are often compared. The U.S. adopted many ideas from the Romans, especially in the government area. Some of these ideas we took were the Senate, a group of representatives who vote on laws, proposals, or other ideas that are brought forth to them. They are also in direct contact with the leader of the country. The U.S. also adopted the idea of checks and balances within our branches of government to limit the power of a certain person or a group of people. For example, in the early Roman Republic, plebeian tribunes could veto laws passed by the government they thought were harmful towards their people. Much like in the U.S., the Senate and House of Representatives could override the president's decision on a law by a certain amount of votes the second time they vote. Another big example is the census, or a survey of the population. Some Roman emperors, namely Augustus, used this idea to count the amount of people who needed to be taxed a certain amount of money. The U.S. States uses it for many purposes, including for taxing people, a population count, and for statistics they can find trends within our country. The U.S. only uses the census every 10 years, however. Both of these nations were world superpowers of their time, both controlling lands only other nations can only dream they have, and both have their weaknesses and flaws. The Romans fell for a number of reasons. The question is, will it happen for us?